Welcome to Garden and Nature Southwest. I am Vani Shukla. In the last episode, we were talking about starting a native plant garden and how to find inspiration for your garden. Where do you look for design? Also, where do you find motivation when you have such difficulty finding native plants in nurseries and garden centers? So today, let's continue with part 2 and let's look at where do you find native plants and also how do you come up with a list? Because as we talked about it last time, before we go to any nursery, we should have in mind some plants that we are going to buy. Just walking in, not knowing anything about plants is not a good idea when it comes to native plants. We often end up with wrong plants. So how do you know about these plants? How do you come up with this list? We'll talk about that. And also I'll give some examples of plants for different spaces, different settings, large spaces or small gardens or patios or container gardens, or if it's a temporary living situation. So let's first start with, where do you find native plants? At this time of the year, something not to miss would be spring plant sales. Many of our Southwest regions have spring plant sales, also fall native plant sales. So look for these sales online. And these are often held by either native plant societies in your local area or different other nature conservation organizations. It could be Audubon or other bird conservation societies, also cactus societies, succulent societies, and botanical gardens, as well as some other nurseries might hold some small sales. Now, some of these are large sales and they are well advertised. They have a website. You can find all sorts of information on the website. Some are quite big that they even make it to the calendar of events on your city website. So some are big, some are very small, and you might have to really dig for specific information. Look for various organizations in your area, nature conservation organizations, wildlife conservation, bird conservation. And it might be just a Facebook post for some of these small sales. So a few that are coming up. First one is this coming Saturday in 2 days, April 11th. There are 2 sales that day. One is in El Paso, Texas at University of Texas, El Paso. And this is a 1-day sale. They have a good website. They also have a list of plants that are going to be available on the sale. And they have some other details about the sale. The second one on the same date, April 11th, is in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And this is by Otero Native Plant Society. They did not have a whole lot of information about the sale. There was just one piece of information that I could find that it's on the same date, April 11th. And just a reminder, this is 2026 spring plant sales that we're talking about, just in case you're listening to this episode in fall or much later in coming years. Some of our spring sales in the Southwest regions have already happened. These are the areas that are warm and spring arrives early in February, March. So many sales in California, Nevada, some in Arizona have already happened. But there are many others coming up in rest of the April and May, especially the cooler climates or higher altitudes like Colorado or northern part of the Arizona, northern New Mexico, Albuquerque, Santa Fe. Many of these, and Utah, many of these areas are going to have them in May and some in April as well. April 25th is another confirmed date that I could find, and that is a native plant sale by Borderland Nursery and Seeds in Patagonia, Arizona. And they also have a good website for different events they hold throughout the year. Any of these dates, locations, website links, the plants that I mentioned in this episode, all of that is going to be in the show notes, so no need to worry about taking notes right away as you're listening. Now let me mention a few nurseries which are good for finding native plants, and I'm going to mention only a few, mostly the ones that I have used for seeds or plants. Those are the ones that I'm going to be mentioning. And some of them are very small. Not many people might know about these. Oh, before that, let me also mention, for starting a native plant garden, it's always best to start with plants rather than the seeds, especially in the beginning. Once your garden is more established, once you are more comfortable with growing native plants, then you may try seeds. Because for many of the native plants, seeds are difficult to germinate. And that might be discouraging in the beginning. So start with plants. So even though I have ordered seeds from some of these companies, they also have plants. These are the ones that I'm going to be mentioning. So first one is Plants of the Southwest in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had ordered seeds. I knew about them for a long time. I was ordering seeds from them. But then recently, last year, I visited their retail location also, and it is quite impressive. They have good selection of native plants. So something to try if you are in that region. Another nursery, if you're in southern New Mexico or West Texas, is Robledo Vista Nursery. That's close to Las Cruces, or I think it is in Las Cruces. I went there a few years back. They also are vendors in the Las Cruces Farmers Market, so they bring their plants to sell over there. But if you want to go to their nursery, then you will have to call and make an appointment. This is a very small nursery, family owned, and you will have some more details on their website. They also post an inventory of plants that they have available in the nursery. Sierra Vista Growers is another one that people in Las Cruces or West Texas can use. It's a very large establishment, very large nursery, has been there for a number of years. It's not just a native plant nursery. It has many other non-native plants and vegetables and fruits and all that, but they always have some native plants as well, good collection of native plants as well. But if you go and buy plants from there, always make sure that these are native plants that you're buying, not drought-tolerant, non-native plants. And this is true for even the smaller native plant nurseries, because as I mentioned in the last episode, these small nurseries, the native plant nurseries, not all the plants are truly native. Many of them could be drought-tolerant, non-native plants, just adapted to our region, Southwest region. Another nursery for West Texas, southern New Mexico region is in El Paso, Texas, and it is known as High Desert Native Plants. If you look at their websites, they are involved in other things as well, like rainwater harvesting system installation. They are also involved in some nature conservation projects. So they have a small family-owned nursery, and this is also by appointments only. I've used this nursery a few years back, and they are wonderful people, very knowledgeable, so something to try if you're in this area. They have a lot of succulent plants, cacti, but other plants as well. And especially if you give them a list of what you're looking for, if the plants get available in future, they can probably give you a call. Now, a couple of other nurseries that I have not used, but will probably be visiting in next few months. One is Spadefoot Nursery in Tucson, Arizona, and this is also a small family-owned nursery. It takes online orders, and then you go and pick up the orders on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Just confirm the dates on their website. But this was very interesting. I found this out through a podcast that I used to listen to by P.T. Moschetti. That's not the real name. Actual name is Peter Gerlach. I'm not sure how correct the name pronunciation is, but there's a podcast called Growing Native by P.T. Moschetti, and I used to listen to that. I was curious to find the website linked to the podcast, and when I searched, Spadefoot Nursery showed up in the search, and that's how I found out that P.T. Moschetti or Peter Gerlach had started this nursery many years ago. So I've been looking at the inventory of plants that the nursery has, and I was impressed by some of the plants that were available at different times. Not all the plants are available at all times. Every few months, I keep checking what kind of plants are available. And some very uncommon plants show up, plants that are not available in other nurseries in our region, in Arizona, New Mexico, or West Texas. So if you're in Tucson, Arizona, you definitely have this great resource. Other one I would like to visit is in Boulder, Colorado, Harlequin Gardens. I learned about this nursery through a documentary that I watched on YouTube, and I was impressed by the information they provided. So that's on my list to visit as well. Apart from these, there are other nurseries, other companies that I have already mentioned in episode 4. That was mainly about where to find native plants, and that has information not only about nurseries, online or retail, not only that, but also other resources to find native plants, what other places you can find native plants. So that's episode 4. Let's now move on to how do you make a list of plants before you go to nursery, before you go to a plant sale. How do you know which plants to buy? Especially when you're not familiar with native plants, you've not seen native plant gardens. How do you know what plants to select? For that, I would first of all start looking at the space that you're going to be growing your garden in. Just have a good feel about what kind of garden would you like there. Even though at this point you do not know anything about what plants will give you that look, doesn't matter. Just have a good idea about what you want. Do you want clean lines? Symmetrical garden, you really, really want that, and other designs of garden just don't appeal to you, then it's good to be clear about that. That way, you will be looking for plants that will fit into that design. Now, does that design matter for the wildlife? Well, as long as you have a good diversity of plants and the plants are not too far apart, it's very sparsely planted garden. If it's not that, then any kind of garden design would be okay. Other kind of gardens could be a rock garden, or maybe just a wild looking garden, just a natural looking garden with winding paths in there. Or it could be a garden that has a look similar to a prairie. Maybe it's a side garden or a long strip that you want to plant in your existing garden. So it's a good idea to have a feel of what you want, even though at this point you do not know what plants will fit there. The next important thing is to look at that area and see which direction the sun shines from. And also to figure out in different seasons where the sun is going to be. This is, again, very important to help you narrow down the plants that you're going to be getting. If it's a shaded area, then they're going to be different kind of plants versus hot, sunny area in the south side of your home, then entirely different plants. There are more details on sun direction and how that is important in growing a garden. You'll find all those in episode number 7. I'll list these relevant previous episodes also in the show notes of this one. So now you have some idea about the type of garden you want. Also, is it a sunny location or is it part shade? And that will help you narrow down the kind of plants that you're going to be looking for. Then also think about what your inclination is at this point regarding wildlife. Out of so many creatures that are going to be visiting your garden, what are the ones that inspire you most at this time? Your inspiration also will continue to grow. You will continue to get more curious. You will continue to learn about so many other creatures and things will continue to change. But at this time, what inspires you most? Is it birds? Is it butterflies? Or is it many other pollinators, insects, little reptiles, lizards and such? When you have that idea, that will also help you narrow down some plants. And the last thing that I would mention to help you select the plants better would be to consider plants from different categories. By categories, I mean, shrubs, trees, ground covers, flowering plants, succulents, cacti. Have an open mind about this. And I mention this because many times when we are starting to garden, we might hesitate about plants that are perennials, that are going to last a few years. And these could be your shrubs and other small flowering plants and many succulents. So many of these plants are perennials, and especially plants that are large, including trees. We might hesitate about these because there's less flexibility, we might think. What if we put it in a location and we don't like it in a few years? That was my hesitation when I first started gardening. And this was way before I started doing native plant gardening. So at that time, I would mainly buy flowering annuals, your petunias, pansies, snapdragons, whatever was available. Many years later, when I started growing native plants, I realized that most of the options that are available for native plants were perennials, including small flowering plants were perennials, which I was not buying before with the non-native gardening. So I got whatever was available. Then, as I continued to learn, I found out the benefits of trees and different shrubs and continue to add that. With each of these additions, your comfort level gets better. Your comfort level of including larger plants, plants that you cannot move easily. The benefits are tremendous. So I would suggest starting them early. I mean getting comfortable with them early on rather than waiting few years. Rather than thinking, let me just start with the smaller plants because I've never gardened before. And if they do well, and if wildlife comes in, if birds start to come in, then maybe, I could consider some larger plants, and that will give me some time to think. Yes, we need time to think, but we don't want to keep thinking for 2, 3, 4 years. There are so many benefits, and it is so rewarding to have these larger plants, even if you have a small space. And I will go over some of these options, but the reward is, or the reason we want to consider these larger plants also early on, and not only larger plants, but plants from different other categories too, we want to consider them right from the beginning, because then you are providing a good, healthy ecosystem to the wildlife that you're attracting. The garden, the little corner, even if it's a little corner, that is going to have an ecosystem develop much faster if you have plants from different category. If you're trying to attract birds or butterflies and different insects, pollinators, whatever, or lizards, whichever is your inspiration, they are going to find your garden much faster if you have some larger plants, because they know if they are in your space, they have a place to hide. A bird may even decide to build a nest there. Who knows? Sometimes it takes a few years for a bird to make nest in your garden, but at other times it might be just a couple of months. So at least have that option for the wildlife. So that is one big benefit, that they are more likely to find your garden. They are more likely to use your garden. The other big benefit is that you don't have to stay on top of all the weather changes and seasonal changes, or if the winter is milder and the spring starts early that year, you don't have to stay on top of these timings, and you're not rushing, going to the nursery, trying to figure out, should I get plants now or should I wait another month? Plants are already there in your garden, and they will respond according to the changes that are happening, and which might be very different from year to year. And also another big difference that happens is when you have just planted an annual. Let's say spring starts in March in your area, and you got something from the garden center or nursery, some annual plant. When you put that plant in, it's going to take a little bit of time for that plant to grow and have a full bloom, become dense, become established. By that time, summer is here, hot weather, and that plant starts to struggle again. With the perennials, if it's a flowering plant or a shrub or anything, They are getting better and better every year. So if you have a flowering plant now, started this spring, in the next spring, this would already be a bigger plant and will be full of lots of blooms as soon as the spring starts. So this is a great thing about perennials that I am realizing in my garden. Also, having plants from different category, different heights, different shapes, sizes, all those will give your garden a better feel as well. So I suggest staying open to choosing plants from multiple category. Not all, it doesn't have to be all categories at once. At least pick 2 or 3 different categories depending on your space. So once you have processed a few of these things, meaning what kind of garden space would you like, where is the sun shining in your garden in different seasons of the year, what wildlife inspires you, and also you're open to different categories of plants, getting different categories of plants. Now it's time to go through list of native plants in your area. The list of native plants for your local region can be available through different resources. One of the most important one is Native Plant Society in your state and the local chapter of that Native Plant Society. Also, other places where you can find the list could be any botanical garden website that you have, also nature conservation websites, Audubon websites. Many of these could provide these lists, as well as sometimes the water conservation through the city, they can have these websites. Now, when you're going through this list, they would have categorized probably, what are the shrubs and what are the trees and ground covers. Many of these lists have these categories. There are a few super important things when you're picking plants. Before you go in depth and learn about the plant, check for 3 things. First thing, keep in mind or make a note of the scientific name of the plant. Second thing you want to research about is the native range of that plant. Where does this plant occur naturally in the wild? What regions of the Southwest? Or it might be, throughout the Southwest. Sometimes we have plants that have native range quite wide throughout the Southwest or throughout the country even. And many of the Southwest plants have a range that extends even in Mexico. So we want to have a good idea about what's the native range of the plant. The website that I usually go to is Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center website. There are other websites too, whichever you get comfortable with, kind of use the same for just time's sake. You don't want to be spending time looking through different websites all the time. So scientific name, and check with that scientific name, because if you're checking and researching a plant with its common name, you might get wrong information. So if you're checking the native range, make sure that the plant that you're reading about is the same plant, the same scientific name. Then the last thing and super important thing is to make sure that that plant is not invasive in your region. And sometimes it would be clearly listed. If the plant is very invasive, it's well known to be invasive in the area, it's just bad, notorious plant, it would be listed. You will find it. But I usually want to be 100% sure. So what I would suggest is type the name of the plant and type the name of the city, do the search, do the specific search with that. Is this plant invasive in this city? So before learning any details about the plants, what the plant looks like, what are the sun and the soil requirements, when is the bloom time, checking out the pictures of the plant, before doing any of that, make sure you have confirmed it with the scientific name, also confirm the native distribution of the plant, and then finally made sure that it's not invasive in your area. Then only go ahead and move further and learn about the plant. Now you are 100% sure that the plant that you are going to get is going to be the right plant. It's not going to get invasive. And then see how it does in your own microclimate. So let's go over a few examples of plants and how could they fit in different settings, different spaces, large spaces, small spaces, patios, container gardens, or if you're renting, it's a temporary thing. What kind of plant choices can you have? So let's start with shrubs and bushes, and some of these can also be trained into small trees. Many of them I have in my garden, so I'm quite familiar with them. Little leaf sumac is one of them. I really love this plant because in different locations, it can serve different purposes. It can be a dense bush, and birds will use them to hide and get shelter. Some will also make nest in these bushes. In my garden, they haven't made a nest in sumacs yet, but I do see quite often in wild, especially in arroyos where there's thick, dense vegetation. I see verdins and other small birds nesting in sumacs. I see the nests there. So it could be a dense bush, and you can control the size however you want. It does not have any thorns, and it does have a lot of berries for the birds to eat. You can also train it as a tree. It can be multi-trunk tree or maybe two. I wouldn't recommend a single trunk, especially if you're in a windy area. Have multiple trunks if you're in a windy area. And after a couple of years, you will find that new plants might show up in your area. It can reseed or also sprout from its roots. The roots spread and then it sprouts in a different location through its roots. So that is little leaf sumac. And any plants that I mention, I would again remind to check again, make sure that it's not going to be invasive in your local region. And the reason I'm being so obsessive about this information on whether the plant is invasive or not, and I always double check when I'm getting a plant, and the reason is that even though a plant can be native to one area in the southwest region, the same plant can become invasive in another location. So let's say something is native to Chihuahuan Desert. It's possible it might be invasive in Sonoran Desert in a particular location. Even within Chihuahuan Desert or within, let's say within Sonoran Desert too, a plant from a very dry location, if you put that in a very wet kind of a location near the river, depending on what your microclimate is, in that location, either that plant may not survive because it's not the microclimate it likes, or it might like it way too much and become invasive. So that's why it's good to check, even for the native plants, to see if they are not likely to become invasive in your area. The second plant I would mention is manzanitas. There are different species of manzanita throughout the southwest regions. In my region, in Chihuahuan Desert, and also in Sonoran Desert and parts of California, also points leaf manzanita is one of them, but there are others too. I love these plants. I don't have this in my garden yet, but I have done a lot of reading. I have seen these plants many times in the wild, and if you're in the areas, especially in Arizona or in California, you probably have seen this plant quite often when you're hiking, or even other plantings that are done by city or commercial spaces. You see manzanita quite often. One thing that happens is that when we see a plant all around us, we may not want it in our garden because it's just too boring, or we want something different in our garden. However, I would suggest not to dismiss completely any plants that are common in your area, not to dismiss them entirely. It might be common in your area, but when you get it into your own garden, it might look very different. The association that you have with that plant, seeing in the wild, seeing in your city, that association is very different. It might be associated by a plant that is commonly found in parking lots. It might be associated with plants that are found commonly in the ditches. Or, when you're hiking, that's all you see and nothing else. But when you get it into your garden, it's going to form a very different association. You're going to have some garden art in between, and specifically talking about manzanita, the branches have such good character, and that's why I love this plant. Not only that, it has berries, it attracts birds, but it looks amazing. Beautiful red bark, and the branches twist and turn into different shapes. And you can train the plant differently, prune the branches to give a very unique look in your garden. And when you have a little garden art in front, or a planter or bird bath next to it, it will have a very different look compared to what you have seen around you. Wolfberry is another one, but it does have thorns. So if it's near a boundary wall, it could be good, or away from the paths. But this does provide good shelter space for the birds, nesting space, as well as berries for the birds. And this was one of the earliest ones to bloom in my garden this year. The flowers themselves are quite small, so they're not visible from far away. What I was seeing was a lot of butterflies and bees going towards the bush. So I went and checked out, and it was blooming, and there were so many different butterflies on that. So wolfberry is a good one. Then three-leaf sumac, that is another sumac that I have in my garden, and it is native to a lot of our southwest regions. You can again have it as a bush or create like a thicket. Skeleton leaf goldeneye, if you're in southern New Mexico or West Texas, this is a native in these areas, and this attracts a lot of goldfinches in my garden. Again, no thorns. This is one of the bushes I really love. It does get quite big. Any of the bushes or shrubs that you're going to consider the final size. Make sure that you have that noted down before you buy the plant. The plants in the nurseries are available in small containers. They're small size at that time, but when they grow bigger, they might be 5 feet by 5 feet or more. So that's true for the skeleton leaf goldeneye. Other ones are algeritas or mahonias, so Mahonia hematocarpa or Mahonia trifoliata. I believe there's another one also that is native to our southwest region, so check your area. But these are often available in nurseries as well. They produce berries, so good for birds, and they are prickly. They're not. It's the leaves have kind of thorny. They are spiky. A little bit. In the beginning, when you're starting a native garden, sometimes we hesitate from the plants that have thorns. But these thorny and spiky plants can have quite a benefit to the wildlife, especially birds, because they can get good shelter in these plants and be safe from the predators. Just last month, I saw a dove had made its nest and laid eggs in the yucca. And what occurred to me at that time is that no way a cat is going up that yucca. It's so spiny. So these plants with thorns or spikes, they can have a lot of benefit to the wildlife. You just need to keep it away from the paths or seating areas if you have pets or young kids. But other than that, they can be so good in the garden. Anisacanthus is another bush that does very well in our southwestern region, tolerates hot sun and attracts hummingbirds. The flowers start to bloom midsummer to late summer, and then it freely reseeds. So many of these bushes have popped up in my garden, and a few of them are in areas where there's absolutely no irrigation, and they're blooming. So definitely a good one to have in the garden. Then there are different sages with purple flowers, attract a lot of pollinators. They start to bloom after the rain. They're native to Texas. Oaks also are available in bushes or shrub, scrub oaks in California and also in Sonoran deserts. Also in Chihuahuan desert, there are oaks that are small. And oaks in general are very beneficial to wildlife and especially insects. So definitely consider oaks if you can find in your local nurseries. Then with the trees, so many of the bushes can be trained into trees. So the sumacs, I have also seen creosote when it's given a little bit of irrigation, it can become very large, and you can have just 2 or 3 main trunks at the bottom, and it can give you that appearance of a small tree. Also, the bird of paradise, the yellow one, that also can be trained into a tree. Other small to medium-sized trees to consider would be desert willow and golden ball lead tree. You may also try some of these small to medium-sized trees in containers. Experiment with it, especially if you have a established garden already. You are not starting new, but you're just looking to add new plants. I have a desert willow in a container, and the tree has remained a small size, very small, about 3 feet maybe, no more than that, and it flowers every year and attracts a lot of butterflies and hummingbirds. So I have that in the front yard near a window. And then there's another one in ground in my backyard garden. This is one of my favorite trees, really, because it attracts so many birds and pollinators. It's just an amazing tree. Golden ball lead tree, also, it can freely reseed. You can have it in different locations. In a patio, it will look good. In a courtyard, it will look good. It's just a beautiful tree, bright green foliage, and also it's not very, very dense. So if you're looking for dappled shade underneath, golden ball lead tree or desert willow or even palo verde, these can be some of the choices. Other few native ones will be Mexican elderberry, Mexican buckeye, netleaf hackberry. Manzanitas that I mentioned earlier can also be trained into small trees, some of the species. So if you have a very large garden and you are completely decided that you will go with native plants throughout your garden space, then go ahead and select several bushes, several trees. Look at the plant list in your local area from the native plant website, from the Native Plant Society websites or other organizations that I mentioned. Select a few because these take time to grow. It will be a few years before they are fully grown and fully mature. Some will take time to grow berries. So, start to think about them right now. Not all of them have to be added at once, but pick a few and start them early. Then coming to smaller plants, flowering plants, there are so many penstemons in our region, in our southwest region, and you will find them in nurseries also these days. Look at what's native and you will have several options from what's native in your area. But I really love penstemons. There are so many different colors. They attract hummingbirds, they attract butterflies and different pollinators. Definitely, they bring life to the garden in spring. So wonderful to have penstemons in your garden. Blackfoot daisy is another one to have in the garden, and it is easily found in nurseries and plant sales as well. And it tends to reseed itself, so in the subsequent years you will have new plants coming up. Also, one thing to remember with many of the plants is that sometimes when you bring the plants from the nursery and you grow them, the plant may not look good that year. It may not thrive. And then winter comes around, the plant may not even survive. But next year you would notice that so many new plants have come up because that plant, prior to dying back, it reseeded. Even though it itself was not doing so great, the new plants that come up now that they have started in your soil from seeds, germinated right there, they will be so much better. They will thrive, and then they will continue to be more the subsequent years. That is true with Blackfoot daisy, desert marigolds, blanket flowers, so many other flowering plants. You will continue to find, even penstemons, you will continue to have these plants, new plants that have reseeded from the previous ones. Cherry skullcap is another plant that I love. It prefers somewhat of a shaded condition or partial sun under a tree would be better. If it's exposed out in southern sun, it's going to not do good. But few of these plants that I mentioned could be really well for a garden if you're just looking for very clean, neat lines, symmetrical. Then cherry skullcap would be one. It is very low to the ground, but it can form a very nice round mound shape, and then it will be covered with a lot of pink color flowers. There's also a blue variety as well, and hummingbirds love these plants. So cherry skullcap could be one for linear kind of clean looking garden if you want that kind of a look. Also for that kind of a look, different agaves are a good choice, and different grasses. That's something that I did not mention in the various categories I was mentioning. So we have different muhly grasses that are native to the region, and they can look really nice in fall with beautiful pink colors or purple colors. So wonderful to have, and they will provide a good habitat for insects to hide during winter. You could have Mexican feathergrass going along a path on both sides, again for a symmetrical kind of a look. One thing with Mexican feathergrass is that it reseeds so freely and can start to grow from like the center of other plants, and can be a bit difficult if the area has some irrigation or it's slightly moist. It is easy to pull out though, but if it's a spiky plant and let's say opuntia or other cacti or spiky succulents that you might have, and the feathergrass starts to grow from the middle of this place, it's difficult to get them out with all the spikes around. But I would still recommend trying it once. See how it does in your garden. See how you are finding it. It's just absolutely beautiful when it flows in the wind. It just looks amazing. Sotols and different yucca species that are native in our southwest region can be really good as well for those linear or clean looking gardens as well. Sumacs, wolfberry, skeleton leaf goldeneye, dahlia, these are going to be more wilder looking plants, and you may want to have them towards the back if you're going for that clean look, and then have some of the other structural plants that maintain their shapes. Damianita daisy is another one that maintains its shape quite well. So these other more sort of tamed plants along the paths, and that could still give you a very good look. I think you can start with that clean look with some of these plants, but as you get comfortable, you might decide next year to experiment with some of these other plants that may not maintain the shape so well, because our tastes, our likes and dislikes about plants, they keep changing as well. So you might find yourself experimenting with more plants later on. If you're going for a more natural look with meandering paths and all, any plant will work, but have a mix of them. That will be not only giving you a very interesting garden, but also will be good for the wildlife. Different cacti, choyas, birds use them for nesting and hiding, so consider those as well in the garden, even if you're not a big cactus fan. Some ground covers to consider would be wine cups, frog fruit, silver ponyfoot, gray five eyes, trailing windmill vine. Some of these are easily available in the nurseries, like the wine cups, frog fruit, silver ponyfoot, depending on the areas that you're in. It's really beneficial to have ground cover. First of all, you're using that space in your land to grow another species of plant, so you're increasing the diversity of plant, and also it's going to be helping so many insects. For example, frog fruit is a host plant to some of the butterflies. So it's always best to have live plants, live ground cover, covering the soil. If not, if there are areas that are bare and they don't have this cover, especially before they get established, you can have some other sort of mulch, wood mulch, bark mulch, pecan mulch. After some time, as plants drop their leaves and twigs and little branches, that itself is just going to become the mulch and cover the ground as well. But it's good to grow these plants as well, the ground cover plants. Now, if you have a large area, then apart from these spreading plants as ground cover, you could also use these other flowering plants or foliage plants as ground cover. It's just that you will have to put several of these plants in ground because they're not going to be spreading, not all of them at least, and not right away, not fast enough. Eventually, a lot of them can reseed and cover a whole lot of area, like the chocolate daisies. They can spread quite a bit in 2 or 3 years. Not spread as in spread by root, but just by reseeding. They can cover a large area. But some of these other plants that I mentioned, the Blackfoot daisy, desert marigold, skullcaps, if it's a partial shade area, many of these, if you put several of them, they can cover the ground as well over the next few years. Damianita daisy also reseeds and makes more of it, blanket flowers, and also different grasses, grama grasses, buffalo grass. Also, if you're looking for a prairie look, you can create that in your side yards, or if there's any, strip of land that you have, a narrow strip of land, you can put a lot of different wildflowers, desert marigold, different cone flowers, Mexican hat is good, echinacea is good. So there are different subspecies of coneflowers that are available that you can try for your region, and combine those with different grama grasses. Also in between, you can throw some penstemons and some liatris. Keep adding as you find new plants. Now, grama grasses and buffalo grass, these are the grasses you can use seeds, and they sprout very well just by seed. Also, if there's an area of grass that you're looking for, instead of lawn, buffalo grass is an option too. If it is a patio, balcony situation, or if it's a temporary situation where you're in the area only for a year or so and you cannot grow plants in ground, then container plants, many of these plants can be grown in the container, especially if it's a large container, maybe 12 inches to 18 inches wide, and maybe similar depth, 18 inches depth. In that one, you could start small bush. You could have different native salvias to invite hummingbirds in your patio. They are so quick to find the patios. Even anisacanthus. I have anisacanthus bush in a container. It's a round container, and it has anisacanthus bush that's just grew by itself, and it's just there. I don't even water that very often. Salvia gregii or Mexican bird of paradise. These are ideally good in ground, but they will do okay in a container too. As I mentioned, I have a desert willow tree in the container, and I'm not talking about a huge container. It's a large container, yes, but the tree itself, I'm amazed. I mean, it's remaining quite small, but it's doing well. It flowers and attracts a lot of hummingbirds and butterflies. So you could experiment with some of these plants, manzanita or golden ball lead tree. These are other few I think you could try in containers, because the bottom part of the plant, the main stem, you can clear the branches from there, and that way you can have some other flowering plants at the base of that plant, of that tree or shrub. You could have silver ponyfoot, You could have cherry skullcap that will also invite hummingbirds, or gaillardia, blackfoot daisy, any of these. But the container has to be large, or try in separate containers. Also, a lot of agaves, cacti, they will do well in the containers too. And in the springtime, the cacti will bloom. They will invite hummingbirds as well. Desert marigold is also quite attractive to pollinators, and that can do well in containers. But with any container plants, you will have to make sure that you have irrigation, because the roots are going to be limited in that container size. They don't have anywhere else to go to look for water. That's what these desert plants, the drought tolerant plants, adapted plants, or native, that's how they're drought tolerant. They go far, either they're spreading, or many of them go deep to look for water. That's what makes them drought tolerant. In a container, it might not be the same. They may not be similarly drought tolerant. So if you have a faucet nearby, then just connect the drip irrigation tubing in the containers, attach a timer, and that will work. But if there's no faucet nearby, there's no other way to put that automatic timer, then those terracotta plant spikes will be another way to have some irrigation there, some moisture there. So even if you miss a couple of days, they're not going completely dry. One important thing to remember with any of the native plants, that yes, they do not require a whole lot of water. You do not want to water them the same way you water vegetable plants or other non-native plants. They also do not require a whole lot of nitrogen and compost and manure, and they are especially our alkaline soils, and the plants that are native to this region, most of them do not require all that. Some of them do. Again, depends on what area you're choosing the plant from, what native region. For example, if they naturally grow near a river, then those are some exceptions. But other than that, their water requirements are going to be less compared to a lot of these other non-native plants. But in the beginning, you may need to make sure that they stay moist. Not wet, but moist. You do not want to keep them completely dry in the beginning because their root system is not established yet. The smaller the plant, so if you're buying a 4-inch pot, that's a very small root ball, and it will dry up very quickly, especially in the summertime. So at least the first year, keep an eye on the irrigation. And that's why one of the very important things, starting with garden, even before you get the plants in, check how you can put automatic irrigation in place. It can be done for small spaces in ground, or patios, balconies, for containers. There's so many different systems available these days for drip irrigation. If you're starting native plants in already existing garden, if you're adding some native plants, then in that case you might already have some automatic irrigation system. Just track the tubing, find out where the little tubings are going to the bushes and the trees. Track those back to the larger tubing, which is the 1/2-inch tubing, and then in that 1/2-inch tubing, then you can attach little tiny tubings for the new plants that you're adding. But automatic irrigation is a must, I think, in our southwest region because of the dry climate, and many of the areas are very hot as well in summer. So it gives you a little peace of mind, because if you forget a few days, then especially the first year, your plants are not going to suffer. Even if you love to hand water and you think you're going to be watering it very regularly, even then I would suggest putting the automatic drip irrigation system. Do it before you get the plants. So that is all I can think of at this time, but in the next few episodes on bird migration, I might think of some other plants as well, and I will mention it then. If you have any questions, then you can email me or text me through the link that is there on the show notes, or also on the website Garden and Nature Southwest. That also has an email link. Until next episode, Happy gardening. Bye bye.